Hi, good evening, and welcome to day 299 of GGY, Good Governance AI. Today, we have, first of all, we are without our main anchor, Chaminder, who's not well. So I'm filling into his shoes. It's an difficult job, but I'm going to do it. Let me recognize the presence of our usual suspects, Auntie Maubrey, Leisha, Anu and CK, who do so much of work behind to make us give you this live. We also need to recognize the presence of our special guest, Beena. Hi, Beena.
Hello.
Thank you for making time. So today what we're going to do is slightly different from our usual roundtable discussion. Beena has, she's authored this, she's the main person behind this documentary, 25-minute documentary called Democracy in Debt. So after a brief introduction, I'll read out her bio and then we'll ask her to tell us a little bit about herself. We'll move straight into the documentary, and thereafter we'll have a small Q&A session thereafter. Beena Sarwar is a prominent multimedia journalist, editor and documentary filmmaker from Pakistan. Recognized for her work on human rights, gender, media, peace, extremism and South Asian issues. She founded the Sapan News Network, aiming to develop it into a professional media outlet, and the South Asia Peace Action Network, Sapan, which has gained widespread support. Beena has held senior editorial positions, including as founder editor of the News on Sunday and being part of the founding team for Pakistan's first 24/7 news channel, Geo TV. As a fellow at Harvard University and the Harvard Kennedy School, she has contributed to global outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times. Beena teaches journalism at Emerson College and has taught at prestigious institutions like Princeton University. Based in Cambridge, she remains a significant voice for peace and democracy in South Asia. Over to you, Beena.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction.
I hope
it was
covered.
Absolutely.
Hope it justifies your.
It's more than.
But I think we'd like to hear from you, you about yourself. Tell us about, things like your family, your background, and how you came about this documentary.
So that's a lot.
That's a lot, yes.
So I'm not going to get into all of that.
Right.
But let me just say that this documentary is part of a journey that I've been on since the 1990s. So for more than 30 years, I've been engaged in peace issues, like particularly India-Pakistan peace. Now we recognize that the situation between India and Pakistan is such that it ruins everything for the whole neighborhood. The whole neighborhood suffers because of the relation between India and Pakistan. And so that's why we started the South Asia Peace Action Network to sort of try and have a regional voice and a regional collaboration and cooperation on all issues. So if France and Germany can be part of the EU, why can't we be part? Why can't this is a region which is geographically, economically, socially, culturally, historically has those linkages. And if we were to have good neighborly relations in all the countries, I think it would reduce extremism, nationalistic, hyper-nationalism, hyper-religiosity, improve economics. A lot of our trade is, this is geographically one of the most integrated regions in which the trade is, it does not happen within the region, it's all happening outside, which is costing us billions of dollars a year. So, and then the work that the Sapan News, as you said, it's a syndicated media outlet. So we send out features to multiple media outlets around the world, particularly around South Asia, so that whatever we publish, whatever we write gets, the narrative gets amplified. We try and go beyond the headlines. We don't do headline, we don't do breaking news, we don't do daily news reports. We provide like explainers, backgrounders, context, to sort of provide nuance and go beyond binaries. And we believe that identities, for example, are not you're not one thing only. Everybody has multiple identities. And even in our countries, like the hard borders that are drawn by as nation states, those hard borders aren't really reflected in reality, because in reality, people on the border areas share languages, culture, they intermarry, they have relationships, and then the border comes and divides. And if there are soft borders, then you can continue those relationships and those economic ties and everything. And why can that not be the case? So I think the reason that's not the case, perhaps, is basically, I think, egos. One is egos. And I'm sorry to say, a lot of it is mostly male egos. With apologies to those who, to our male allies. And another issue is, I think, the weapons industry and the geopolitical forces that don't want us to be. They gain so much by our tensions.
Would you say religion is also a big part of this?
I don't think religion is part of it. And religion is made to be a part of it, because all religions have the same basic teachings. And one thing that I've really realized is, like, for example, in the Buddhism, be the change, that very fundamental thing. And Islam also, the greater jihad, or the greater holy war, so-called, is the struggle within to be your own best self, to conquer your own worst traits. The lesser jihad is the physical one, which engages in physical violence, and even that comes with so many conditions. And what is done, because this so-called jihad that is being waged, it does not follow those rules, and I think it's a kind of a hijacking of the religion. And I think that's what's happened with all religions, that the extremists hijack them and make it so that people who are not following those extremist paths get defensive, and everybody has to prove who's a better follower of that religion and who's not. And then they start attacking you for not being good enough, for saying the wrong thing, and So I think, and that's all political. It's all about political power, I think. So,
divide and rule.
Absolutely.
Is this the first time you're doing a documentary about Sri Lanka?
About Sri Lanka, yes.
Okay.
Most of my all of my documentaries so far have been about Pakistan. The last documentary I made was actually more than 10 years ago, because after that I moved to the States. And then I was settling in, my daughter was in school, I was trying to figure out how I'm going to manage. And the last documentary I made was about the student movement that my father led when he was a medical student. And he was in jail when he got his medical degree. This is back in the 50s. And that's also online. It's on my YouTube channel. And I learned many lessons from my research into that student movement. I made it after he passed away in 2009, because we felt that it was important to document that movement, because they were all he was 79 when he passed, so all his contemporaries were that age. And there is no mention of this in any of our textbooks. It's not there in any official narrative. The only way that we know about this student movement, that was a nationwide student movement, including then East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. The only reason we know about is because we know the people who are involved. And the progressive constituencies of the country, they've kept that, and people have done research on it, and people have written a few books. But there wasn't any really, I think I did a kind of a pioneering thing. I don't like to sort of say that about myself, but I had that access. And I think, as anybody knows, those of you who are here who are filmmakers, you know that access is critical to doing anything. If you don't have the access, you can't do the work. So the lessons I learned from that, for example, are lessons I think that are valuable to any movement. For example, unite on a broader platform for a minimum common agenda, right? To rise above ideological differences for that greater common goal. To the importance of documenting what you're doing, to sort of forge your own narrative as well. And to stay focused on that, and not to be reactive, and not to get into what we call in Urdu tu main, not get involved in like name calling, and just like do your work. And if somebody is like attacking you and all that, well, then that's their problem. You do your work, and don't get engaged in like spats, because that's doesn't help anybody. That's what they want, that negative attention. So I just want to say one more thing, which is that speaking of negative attention, because anybody here who is involved in any kind of parenting has heard the term negative attention, because kids who want negative attention act out, right? They don't use their words. And we tell kids, use your words. So this is what people in politics and all have to do also, is to use their words and not get engaged in fighting, and not get engaged in physical violence, right? Because that's childish behavior, and what we need is more adult behavior, right?
I think it's interesting that you mentioned this rewriting of history, because we have, I don't know whether our rulers are following what happened in Pakistan back then, but we have certain politicians trying to rewrite history in Sri Lanka about what happened. People got onto the streets because our rulers failed us, and they created economic crisis. There were people who died in fuel queues and as a result of gas explosions.
Yeah.
That's what pushed people, because Sri Lankans are generally very
passive.
Yeah, they absolutely had no option. Some of our groups started off also on that basis.
Exactly.
But now that everything has been brought to a, shall I say,
some level
level of stability.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what people don't realize is that fuel was being sold at 150 rupees a litre. Now then it went up to 450. Now it's come down to 350. So they contracted demand. Even electricity, power, the prices I think went up 3 times. Anyway, it went up astronomically. And now, so obviously, and there were about 1 million electricity disconnections last year.
That's right.
So, I mean, there is stability for a few.
Yes.
And at what cost?
Yes.
But I was going to tell you that there are some politicians now who are saying that it's the people who came onto the streets who caused economic, and they keep saying it so many times.
Yes.
That there are very few.
An oft-repeated lie.
That's right.
So that's a very famous tactic, right? That they used it. Hitler's Goebbels. That you keep repeating the same thing again and again, and we are seeing this in Bangladesh now as well. What's happening in Bangladesh is exactly what you're saying. That they're trying to paint the protesters as the villains, and although they started as a peaceful protest and they were attacked.
Anyway, so there are a lot of parallels we can draw. I think.
And that's one of the things we want to do, is to have that regional, to draw those parallels, to see the patterns, to realize that things don't stop at the borders. We are the same people essentially in this region. Our leaders are the same kind of people, and so the tactics they use are the same. And in the same way, the student movement, it was a peaceful movement, and the police opened fire, killed people, and that's what catalyzed, the greater movement in a way.
All right, guys. I think now we'll move to the main part of the documentary. I'd like to ask our viewers to stay tuned for a while till we arrange our seating so that all of us can watch this. I've seen it, and you have to watch it. It is a very beautifully done documentary. And I was telling her before we met that some of those images I haven't seen of our country. And they're really nice images that she's got.
Yes.
So please hold on for a while.
A teardrop at the cusp of South Asia and the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka is home to one of the world's oldest living cultures. It is also one of the world's longest-standing democracies. It has survived world wars, cold wars, civil wars, and popular uprisings. The island's ancient irrigation system is an interlinked network of waterways and massive lakes known as vevas. Conceived, engineered, and maintained by kings, this system has sustained forests, villages, home gardens, and fields of rice for nearly 2 millennia. A bird's eye view shows some 14,000 ancient tanks spread across Sri Lanka's central and northern provinces. The vevas still form the basis of a way of life, underpinning the country's economy and prosperity. They are internationally recognized as a globally important agricultural heritage system. The British conquered Kandy, Sri Lanka's last independent kingdom, in 1815. The Dominion of Ceylon became one of the richest jewels in the imperial crown. Its new capital, Colombo, became the third most important port of the British Empire, and Sri Lanka became the trading hub of South and Southeast Asia. In 1931, after ruling for over a century, the British enacted a new constitution in Sri Lanka, granting every adult the right to vote. Sri Lanka became the first country in Asia with universal suffrage, upholding the principle of one person, one vote, irrespective of race, class, ethnicity, or gender. Britain had passed universal suffrage in 1928, followed by Australia, Canada, and South Africa. All Americans obtained the universal, unconditional right to vote in 1965, after the official end of segregation and decades of civil rights protests. My life has been shaped by different worlds. As an advocate for peace in South Asia and beyond, a journalist from Pakistan now living in America, I know that democracy, like peace, is a process, not an event. I see various forms and patterns in situations around me. Since independence in August 1947, Pakistan has alternated between democracy, quasi-democracy, and dictatorship. Similar patterns are visible elsewhere in South America, Asia, and parts of Africa. The COVID-19 pandemic catalyzed many crises. One of these was the collapse of Sri Lanka's economy between 2021 and 2022. The country ran out of money. It also ran out of food, medicine, petrol, diesel, gas, and electricity. People came out onto the streets in protest. For 2 months, the photogenic and largely peaceful people's struggle, with its sustained, decentralized neighborhood demonstrations, captured imaginations the world over. On May 9, 2022, the peace was shattered when the Prime Minister's supporters attacked protesters at the Golf-Face Green in Colombo. There was an outpouring of rage across the country. Politicians' homes were burnt down. Massive crowds overran President's house, the Presidential Secretariat, and Prime Minister's house. The President imposed curfew and deployed troops on the streets. But unlike in Pakistan, they did not open fire. Forced to resign, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled to the Maldives. His brother, the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, also resigned. It was a bloodless revolution. In 100 days of sustained protest, the Aragalaya had unseated a government, a president, and a prime minister. The attack on the state capitol in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021 came to mind. Exactly a year later, the violence of May 9 in Colombo echoed in Pakistan on May 9, 2023. I see the people's frustration and impatience with the political process reflected in these situations. On July 2022, Sri Lanka's parliamentarians elected acting president and former 6-time Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe as the 9th president of Sri Lanka. The economic collapse had catalyzed a revolution, but democracy survived. Fewer people died in those 100 days of protest in Sri Lanka than those killed daily by gun violence in the United States. As I gazed at the work of kings, I wondered about the nature of democracy. Democracy is a social contract where people give leaders a loan of power. The leaders must work to repay that debt. As elsewhere, Sri Lanka's leaders have failed to honor that contract. The result is a real financial debt that the country now owes international institutions. This has led to a massive socio-economic crisis. How will democracy navigate its way out of this situation? Do its leaders have what it takes? Will the people accept what the leaders deliver? Dutuveva is an ancient village or Puranagama at the core of Sri Lanka's dry zone. It lies near Anuradhapura in north-central province at the heart of the island's rice-growing country.
දුටුව පරණගම කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම පෞරාණික ඉතිහාසයක් තියෙන ගමක්. මේක දුටුව පරණගමේ නම හැදුණු විදිහ කිව්වොත් අතීතයේ කට්ටියගේ ජනප්‍රවාදයක් තියෙනවා. දුටුගැමුණු රජතුමා එතුමාගේ අස්සයත් එක්කන් මේ ප්‍රදේශයේ සංචාරය කරන අවස්ථාවක ගැටලාව කියන ග්‍රාමයේ මේ අස්සයා ගැට ගහලා තියලා මෙතුමා මේ ගිමන් හැරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වෙලාව මේ අස්සයා මෙතනින් ගැලවිලා ගිහිල්ලා මේ අස්සයා හොයාගෙන යන අතරතුරේ මේ අස්සයා දුටු ස්ථානය දුටුව පරණගම කියලා තමයි ජනප්‍රවාදී විදිහට පහු කාලෙක දුටුවව කියන නම හැදිලා තියෙන්නේ.
This is also elephant country. Electrified barbed wire fences around the vevas and forests prevent wild elephants from entering settled areas at harvest time. Amila Sampath is a 30-year-old father of 2. He and his family are farmers. They run a grocery store for extra income. Amila has lived here all his life and wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
බොහොම අහිංසක ගොවිතැන් කටයුතු වලින් ජීවත් වෙන පුද්ගලයන් පිරිසක් ඉන්නේ. මම හිතන්නේ ඇත්තටම රටට බත සපයන හොඳ ගොවි මහතුරු ටිකක් ඉන්න ගමක් මේක. ඊට අමතරව අපේ ලස්සන ගමක් පුරාණ වැව් දෙකක් තියෙනවා, පුරාණ වෙල්යායක් තියෙනවා. මම හිතන්නේ අපේ ප්‍රදේශයේ ජනතාව මම හිතන්නේ මේ රටට ගොඩක් සේවයක් කරනවා.
Amila's uncle Vipula grew up in Dutuveva. A farmer and a soldier, he is now employed at Riddhi Vihara, one of Sri Lanka's most historic temples.
අර කතාවටත් කියවනේ වැවයි දාගබයි ගමයි පන්සලයි කියලා. ඒතර වැවේ වැදගත්කම කියන්නේ අපිට අක්කර 100,000 ගාණක් මේ වැව යටතේ ගොඩබෝග මඩගොවිතන කරගන්නවා. වී වගාව එතකොට ගොඩබෝග අපි මේ වැවෙන් මේ වතුරේ මේ සම්පතෙන් තමයි අපි මේ සම්පූර්ණම පල්ලෙහා අක්කර 100,000 ගාණක් වගාව කරගන්නේ. දැන් මේ රූස්ස කැලෑව සම්පූර්ණම මේකේ වනසතු තමයි ජීවත් වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් මේ වනසතුන්ට නාගන්න එතකොට අලි එහෙම ඉන්නවා මේ මහ කැලෑවේ. ඉතින් මුන්ට නාගන්න වතුර ටිකක් බොන්න මෙතනින් එහාට ආය වැව් කඩිති නැහැ. ඉතින් මේ කිවුලේකඩ වැව කියන මේ මහා ලොකු අපේ සම්පත තමයි අපිටත් සත්තුන්ටත් මහා ලොකු ප්‍රයෝජනයක් විදිහට මේ වැව පාවිච්චි වෙන්නේ. අපි පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ. මේ හරිය කැලෑව නිසා ලොකු වපසරියක් වතුර ප්‍රමාණයක් අල්ලන විදිහට තමයි මේ වැව මහසෙන් රජතුමා හදලා තියෙන්නේ. අපිට හුස්ම ගන්න මේ පරිසරය අවශ්‍යයි.
The voter turnout in Sri Lanka has consistently been over 70%, the highest in the region and one of the highest in the world. It is villages like Dutuveva that will decide the future of the country. Former Director General of the Sri Lanka Press Institute, Dr. Ranga Kalang Surya, is a prominent journalist and media academic.
If you look at the grassroots polity of Sri Lanka, grassroots administration, the political administration has collapsed. We have not had local government election. It's long overdue.
ලොකු ගැටලුවක් තියෙනවා මේ ගොවිතැන් කටයුතු වල තියෙන අමුද්‍රව්‍ය වල මිල අධිකකම සහ යෙදවුම් වල මිල වැඩිකම නිසා අපිට ඇත්තටම ගොවිතැන් කටයුතු වල පොඩි ගැටලු ඇති වෙලා තියෙනවා. මම හිතන්නේ රටේ තියෙන ආර්ථික ප්‍රශ්න හින්දා මේක කාලයක් යනකොට විසදේ කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා. අපි අර ගොවිතැන් කරනවා ආදායමක් ගත්තට ඒ ආදායම මිනිස්සු අතර රැඳපැවැත්මක් නැහැනේ. බොහෝ කට්ටිය ණය වෙලානේ ගොවිතැන් කරන්නේ. ඒ ගොවි ජනතාව ඇති කරලා ඉඩම් බෙදලා මම හිතන්නේ ඒ ගත්තු මේ මහවැලි ව්‍යාපාරය ආරම්භ කරලා ඒ ගත්තු තීන්දුව තීරණ හින්දා තමයි ගොවිතැන් මේ මට්ටමකට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ. හිතන්නේ මේ යම්කිසි කාල පරාසයක ඒ ගොවිතැන රැකගා ගත්තු තීන්දුව රැකගන්න බැරි වෙච්ච ප්‍රශ්නයක් තමයි.
Dinesh Gunawardena is the 22nd Prime Minister of Sri Lanka.
We were working for the stability. First, the problem was food security. At the same time, our foreign debt, convincing the international community was also challenging because we continued to go into borrowing. They were asking, we are not managing. But managing is the current most competitive issue in market economies. First harvest delivered a surplus. That gave the tremendous confidence that we can deliver.
Dr. Dushni Virakon is the Executive Director of the Institute of Policy Studies, an autonomous institution focusing on policy-oriented economic research.
Economic crisis isn't something that, sprang up overnight. It's been something that's been building up. We've been having extended fiscal imbalances, living beyond our means. But I think COVID-19 was a trigger, impacted not just Sri Lanka, but, all over the world. So the question always is, why did we get into this mess and other countries didn't? I think the answer is a combination of governance failures, weaknesses, as well as inappropriate policy responses.
Ahilan Kadurgamar is a sociologist, anthropologist, and economist at the University of Jaffna. He is also a member of IDEAS, the International Development Economic Associates. This is a network of distinguished practitioners across the world, primarily from the global south.
In the 1970s, Sri Lanka, along with Cuba and the Indian state of Kerala, were considered model development states or regions, for the reason that Sri Lanka since the 1940s has free education, free healthcare, and even had a universal food subsidy. Even today, universal healthcare and education continues. That is what has kept our society afloat. But in reality, this crisis has been long in the making. Since the late 1970s, when we went through the crisis of the 1970s, we started liberalizing our markets, opening our economy, and privatizing services. And this sort of policies meant that we were susceptible to shocks. Now, Sri Lanka went through a long civil war, so they couldn't push through those policies much further. But soon after the end of the war, if you look at Colombo, it's like night and day, right? The amount of infrastructure, hotels, these trophy projects, and all of that with tremendous international borrowing. Not just from China, actually the majority of our debt is from hedge funds and these global financiers in what I call international capital markets. And that debt was unsustainable. The Easter bombings, the COVID crisis, and then the war in Ukraine kind of pushed us over the cliff as we could not service our imports. So that is how the crisis came about. But in a way, it was inevitable given the policies that we were taking forward. And it's not just Sri Lanka. If you look around the world now, between 50 to 70 countries, depending on whose estimates, are in debt distress. Close to 10 countries like Sri Lanka have defaulted. In the region, Pakistan, Bangladesh are in serious trouble. And the question before all of us is, what needs to change for us to get out of this?
The future of Sri Lanka's democracy hinges upon the ability of its leaders to understand the challenges ahead.
කතාවට කියනවා රටේ රජා රටේ නායකයා පිරිපුන් හැම දෙයකින්ම උසස් පුජ්‍යලයක් වෙන්න ඕන කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ අංග සම්පූර්ණ මිනිස්සෙක් වෙන්න ඕන කියන රටේ රජා. රටේ රජා අංග සම්පූර්ණ වුණොත් තමයි රට ස්වයංපෝෂිත වෙන්නේ කියනවා. නැත්තම් රට කණවැන්දුම් කියලා කියන්නේ රටට හෙන ගහනවා කියලා කියනවා. අපේ රට ගැනම ගන්න ඕන ගමේ ගෙදර මගේ ගෙදර මම කෙලින් නැත්තම් මං අංග සම්පූර්ණ නැත්තම් මගේ දරුවෝ ගැන එතනින් එහා හිතලා වැඩක් නැහැ. ඒ වගේ තමයි රටත්. රටේ රජා අංග සම්පූර්ණ නැත්නම් රට ස්වයංපෝෂිත වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
So people say Sri Lanka is now in an IMF bailout. There's really no bailout. The IMF's $3 billion over 48 months amounts to just $60 million a month. It's peanuts, right? Sri Lanka's foreign earnings each month is 30 times that amount of $1,800 million. That is how Sri Lanka is surviving. That is how it's paying for its essentials. And as we go forward, we need to figure out how Sri Lanka is going to move forward, not only in terms of paying for its essentials, but making sure its society can survive.
Dutuweva's society and culture are conditioned by its overwhelmingly Buddhist identity. The hub of village life remains the temple, and the role of the high priest is paramount in the community. The head monk reflects a deep disillusionment with politics and established political parties.
තණ්හාය ජායති සෝකෝ. දැඩි ලෙස තණ්හාවෙන් බල අරගලය වෙනුවෙන් වැඩ කරනවා. ආර්ථිකය දැඩි ලෙස හම්බ කරන්න උත්සාහ කරනකොට ඒකේ අවසානයක නොලැබීම දුකට වේදනාවට හේතුවක් වෙනවා.
Many want a radical change.
ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් අපිට තේරෙනවා දැන් මේ අවුරුදු ගාණක් මේ කරපු ක්‍රමය හරි ගියේ නැහැ කියලා. දැන් ඒක අසාර්ථක වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට අපි ඉස්සරහට තරුණ පිරිසත් එකතු කරගෙන ලොකු අදහස් ටිකක් අරගෙන තමයි ඉස්සරහට ගමනක් යන්න ඕනේ නැත්තේ. මම හිතා සම්පූර්ණ මේ සිස්ටම් එක චේන්ජ් වෙන්න ඕනේ.
The presidential elections, scheduled to take place later this year, are just one of the 4 elections which the country must hold.
So any person comes into power as a president, he need a strong parliament. So then this is not a strong parliament. This is a hung parliament, or so many issues, because the mix of camps, who is supporting whom we don't know. Even that particular person don't know, today he's supporting someone and then next month. So it's very fluid situation, number one. Number two, there is a massive perception among the public that this parliament is full of corrupt politicians. So anybody who needs a clear majority or clear mandate, they need to have some fresh people in parliament to get support of the people, grassroots support. So these 2 reasons will affect to dissolve parliament. And then provincial elections, and then local government elections. So 4 elections are overdue within the next year. So that will cost Sri Lanka, at least in Sri Lankan rupees, 24 billion. If you put 6 billion to each election, that's almost $1 billion.
Nearly a quarter of Sri Lanka's population was under 15 years old at the start of 2024. Since gaining independence in 1948, Sri Lanka has made considerable progress in improving the day-to-day lives of its citizens and its children. This progress ground to a halt with the COVID-19 pandemic. The economic crisis hit just as the situation was normalizing. Sri Lanka had some of the longest school closures in the world. Fuel scarcity and the high cost of learning materials stopped students and teachers from going to school regularly. The teachers and students at this village government school all belonged to farming families.
I'm Dilakshika. I'm Nipuni. I'm Matin. Thank you for coming to meet me.
Everyone we speak to has the same story. Life is tough and it is hard to make ends meet. They manage to survive because they are engaged in farming. They know what the government needs to do to make things better. Vice Principal and Senior Level Economics Teacher WMSR Vali Sundare also owns an acre of land.
ගොවිතැන් වල ඉතින් ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ සමහර කාලවලට දැන් තියෙනවා සමහර කාලවලට අඩුයි ඉතින් දැන් මේ අර පහුගිය දවස්වල තිබ්බ තත්ත්වෙට වඩා නම් ඇත්තට යම් ප්‍රමාණයක යම් ඉස්සරහට යන ප්‍රවණතාවයක් තියෙනවනේ. හැබැයි ඉතින් මේක ස්ථාවරයි කියන කාරණේට එකඟ වෙන්නත් බෑ ඉතින්.
I would say that we have started to make steady progress in fixing the key issues on the macro front, on the fiscal front, and on the monetary policy front. And that you see by the numbers, inflation has sort of decelerated very sharply. growth is now at least in positive territory, though it's very, very modest. So we do need to see a sharp pickup in growth to ensure that, jobs, livelihoods, all of those things recover. That's going to take a fair bit of time. My estimate would be something beyond 5 years. We will see a gradual recovery in growth. So a long stretch of modest, cautionary policy is needed without becoming too ambitious and then plunging us back into chaos. So for us, I think the immediate risk is we have elections forthcoming. Will we be able to get through that without policy reversals and upsetting the recovery process to date?
හිටපු අපේ රජවරු මේ වගේ සම්පතක් අපිට හදලා දීලත් මේ රටෙන් මෙච්චර දේවල් කරලා දීලත් මේ රටේ මේ විදිහටම තාම අගාධයටම ඇදගෙන යනවා නම් අය එතනින් එහා දියුණු වෙයි මේ රට කියන එක නම් මම නම් කීයටවත් හිතන්නේ නැහැ. රටට හෙන ගහලානේ තියෙන්නේ. දැන් මොකද ඉස්සර නායකයොත් එක්ක තිබුණ විශ්වාසය ඉස්සර තිබුණා. නමුත් මම නම් විශ්වාස කරන්නේ නැහැ. මම කොහොමදවත් විශ්වාස කරන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද දැන් සාමාන්‍ය අපිට ඇහෙන දෙයක් අපි විශ්වාස කරන්න පුළුවන්. අපිට කනට ඇහෙන දෙයක් අපි ඔව් නේද කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරන්න පුළුවන්. නමුත් ඇහැට පේන දෙයක් අපි හිතන විදිහට වැඩේ කෙරෙන්නේ නැත්නම් ඇහැට පේන දෙයක් අපි කොහොමද විශ්වාස කරන්නේ? විශ්වාස නොකරන පැත්තට තමයි ඇහැ විතරක් නෙවෙයි හිතත් හැරලා තියෙන්නේ විශ්වාස නොකරන පැත්තට.
Colombo is where decisions are taken, where decision makers live, where they debate and enact policy. This may be the seat of power, but in a democracy, the real power lies with the people. Politicians and policy makers are ultimately influenced and shaped by voters, by the people of villages like Duttuveva. I spent my last night on a rock, surrounded by the forest, the waters of an ancient lake lapping at my feet. Sri Lanka is no longer in crisis, but it is in debt. The politicians are in debt to the people. The people are in debt to the world. Elections will be held. They are part of the process of democracy. Democracy is a process, not an event. As the late Pakistani Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto famously said, democracy is the best revenge.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that documentary. We certainly did. It was my second time watching it. Thank you, Beena, on behalf of, I think, all of us citizen activists. It is amazing to see what you put into this documentary. I think there are two people you'd like to recognize their presence, isn't it? Why don't you?
So the cinematographer, director of photography Yoshita Pereira, and the editor Sandurban are here.
If you could focus on them.
I'm very happy that you guys could make it, and they worked very hard with me on this. It was not easy. There were a lot of frustrations and a lot of road bumps, and Roshita was with me in Dutuweva, where we had it was amazing, but one bathroom between 10 people was not easy.
All right, I can
and there
imagine.
were we will not talk about this other things.
But amazing. I mean, the result is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Adi Mombri, Lisha, anything to ask Beena about this?
Yes,
Guy,
can I
any of
ask
you?
something? You did this recently.
Yeah, I did it in May.
Because you
in
have
May.
taken.
Yeah, in May. And I just want to also say that, I made documentaries before, and it takes 2-3 months to make a documentary this length normally, and we did this in less than a month.
Wow.
So it was, it was really actually a bit crazy.
Right, so you have gone through the country and this, what you have done in this documentary. What do you feel will happen to this country? Do you think we have hope?
Of course there's hope. I mean, I hope that the message that I leave is one of hope, because I feel that for sure. And like I said, democracy is a process, not an event. And if you stick with the process, and if you stay engaged with the process, just when I finished making this documentary, the India results were announced. And I felt that this was so relevant, because the electorate of India came out and they were engaged, and they did something which nobody had expected. The political pundits, because what happens is that the political analysts are going by what's coming up in the media and social media and all.
Yes.
And that's not reality.
Okay.
That's not reality. So the reality is when people actually go out and vote, that's when you see what, you can't predict it. So so definitely I think that if we can't afford to get smug. I think when people get smug about democracy, then there are very negative repercussions, and we've seen that in India, we've seen that in America, in the United States where I live. But if people come out even now and are engaged, then they can deliver, some results that, because democracy is a process and it involves people, and it may not be a perfect system, and it certainly isn't a perfect system. There are a lot of questions about the representational nature, the majoritarianism, or there are a lot of questions about the system, but we don't really have a better one right now in terms of representing people from the grassroots level up to the top.
Okay.
About I think people getting involved, I think the 2022 Aragale, what it was called, the people's struggle, that's where people realize the power they have. And I think the government also realized, to their dismay, how powerful people could be. That is why I think we had a guest here who spoke about how this government is passing bad faith laws, and those laws are coming on the fast train, while the good laws, the laws that should be coming, regarding corruption and things like that, are coming on the slow train.
Yes.
That train is always breaking down.
Yes.
We've had laws like the ATA, then the OSB, Online Safety Bill. Even we now have to be extra careful about what we say, because it can be used.
Yes.
But that is all a result of the government realizing the power of the people.
Yes.
And they want to suppress it.
Yes. And we are seeing this pattern all over the region, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in India. And the other thing I want to say is the importance of non-violent struggle, because the people's struggle was a non-violent one, and then when the violence happened, there's also a lot of questions about who was behind the violence, who were the people, and that's what typically happens when these kind of violence happens. It's not a spontaneous, I think that there's a lot of vested interest, criminal elements that come in, political elements that come in or are made to, are injected in order to, kind of discredit the nature of the.
So you can imagine, with all these laws that are coming in, and people not being able to show dissent.
Yes.
Even our movement. I mean, we've spoken about it before here. We have been attacked. We have many times. Some of our members' tires have been slashed. We are continuously monitored by plainclothesmen. They take photographs and all of us. But still, we have continued. But not many can do that. Not many have the luxury of being able to do that.
Yeah.
So we use that privilege that we have to keep, because there are many who ask us, why are you doing this? Because your lives are okay.
Yes.
You all were in full queues, you all had gas queues, you all were without power, but now all that is okay. What are you all getting on the street for?
Yeah.
But we are there on behalf of those who cannot speak.
Exactly.
And Beena, one more thing regarding this, I mean, everybody is waiting, because since they are being restricted so much, they are waiting for this election.
Yeah.
And I think, as your documentary collectively said, one election is way overdue, the local government. Even after the courts instructed the finance ministry to release the funds, it wasn't done, and the elections were not held. Now we see, we are suspicious of the efforts that are happening, what is going on right now, because we see a blatant attempt to postpone this election. And in fact, if you look at our current president, he has been the head of the party which lost almost 30 elections. And also, at the last election, the parliamentary election, he only polled 30,875 votes. So from his point of view, it's natural to be scared of elections, to want to postpone elections. But that's not, I mean, 22 million Sri Lankans fault. And we need to have these elections, especially since when all our many of our other rights are being suppressed. So in this backdrop, we welcome such documentaries, and we hope Sri Lankan filmmakers will maybe see this. And I know a few who have, one or two, and I've been to see them, but I'm sure they can see what you've done and emulate what you've done.
And actually something that struck me with the people you interviewed in village level, I mean, they may not be PhDs and graduates, but they can see what is going on. They really have, they can
say that, yes.
I mean, they're talking of system change, they don't trust the politicians, nobody can. But they see it now. I mean, earlier, the politicians will give them a gift of a bag of 10 kilos of rice or something, and through that then they will convert them to vote. But I don't think they'll be able to do that anymore. They may still take the rice, and I think they should. It's our money, and after all.
Absolutely.
But
when you go into
vote for the right person, vote for a decent person, somebody who's not involved in a corruption scandal, someone who has not been part of bankrupting this country, someone who's not a thug. So
one of the problems I had was I spoke to a leading politician maybe a year ago or something like that. I said, now the time, why don't you get these young people, new people into your party so they can contest. But he told me first of all, there's no democracy in the party. Exactly, he told me. Okay, because they had enough time to get some proper people without all these corrupt people in their parties. So that was a direct answer. So
audience, do you all have any questions or would like to ask Beena? We have many who we have not named also. Nice to see so many new faces, but is there anything you'd like to ask? Yes? Sure. Would he need a mic? Is he okay? Difficult, is it? All right, okay.
Yeah. Fidel, just introduce yourself also, and I'm so glad you came. Thank you for coming.
Yes, I'm Fidel Fernando.
He's a brilliant writer.
Right, welcome.
I wanted to ask you what you, because the issue of elections was brought up, but what you felt from people in the two what was their kind of the appetite for having elections? How desperate were they to be able to go out and cast their votes? And also, is there something in the film that you wanted to say but didn't end up in the final cut?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we ended up having to take out, and there's actually some stuff that's going to be part of another film that is different from this one, but those villagers are the people who had voted for the Rajapaksas. That's their constituency. That's the thing, and now they are not going to. They were like, not at all. I mean, that was very, very clear. They were like, we're not going to vote for these guys again. So, but I didn't see any kind of feeling of fear or that we will not be allowed to, if that's what you're asking. And I think that is a good thing about this country right now anyway, that there hasn't been that kind of manipulations, I think, or there's not expected to be. There's a lot of watchdogs around. There's a lot of people who will, I don't think they can.
Last couple of elections have been quite peaceful.
Yeah. So I didn't get that sense from them that there's any kind of, manipulation that they're expecting or anything like that.
I think you also asked about the appetite, right? With the people.
Appetite for
elections. They're going to. I got the feeling that they will go vote. They want to make their voice count. That's the feeling I got. They said the system must change, but they also recognize that they are part of the system, and that the sense I got was that they are engaged. They are not disengaged. Like they expressed their disillusionment, but nobody said, I'm not going to vote.
That's very important.
Yes. Yeah. To be honest, I didn't really specifically ask, are you going to vote or not? But then, if somebody is not going to vote, they would say, well, we're not going to vote. But I didn't get that sense at all.
That's refreshing.
And the other thing is that, when I was doing my research, I was just stunned to find that the voter turnout has been more than 70% in this country, and it's not even mandatory. It's the highest in the region, and it's among the top 50 in the world, and so those top 50 include countries where it's mandatory. It's linked to your tax, whatever. If you don't vote, you get, tax extra, or you have to.
Yes. Like
so it's one of the highest. So people are really engaged, and I mean, I wasn't able to get into that in this film, but the issue of education, because that came up a lot, right? The issue of education, that almost universal education. I met this one teacher, but I wasn't able to film him. Remember, Mr. Dinapal, the English teacher. So he was able to speak to me in English. And he had retired. But there's a real sense of what I got, at least from anecdotally, like he was somebody who had retired and he was spending his life helping other people. They're not materialistic. They're not trying to build palaces, and they're happy living where they're living. They don't like Amina, the guy, I asked him, would you want to live anywhere else? Unlike villages in, say, Pakistan or India or whatever, where a lot of people, young people don't want to stay in the village anymore, they want to go to the city. I didn't get that sense in Tutuveva. The young people there, they're staying there. They go, and I asked them about that, and they said that people go to the city, maybe they'll go to work but then they'll come back because they don't like it there. So they have everything they need over there. And one line that got cut out for some reason, if I can maybe put it back in at some point, where they're very internet. They all have smartphones. So when he knew my name, he had looked me up on the internet. He had looked up my articles. He had Google translated them and read them. And so the line was that his smartphone gives him access to YouTube and Google Translate. And that's what a lot of, the world is changing, and people are not stupid at all, and they never were. And what somebody has said this, and I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that journalists often make, is that they don't go talk to the quote-unquote little people. They'll talk to politicians, economists. They don't talk to the people on the street, to the people in the villages, and those are the people who are the majority, actually, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we saw what they did in India, right? We saw what happened in England, in France, and maybe that's going to happen in the US at the end of this year. I think there's going to be some, people are like, I think it might be a little bit more surprised. There might be more surprises than people are expecting.
Oh, okay. All right, in the absence, are there any more questions?
Sure.
Cyrus.
Go ahead.
So Cyrus is from Pakistan.
Yes.
And he is also a filmmaker. So.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask, what do you see as some of the things that Sri Lanka maybe needs to do, regardless of whichever government comes in, and even if successive governments change, or what sort of reform policy? Because obviously you seem to suggest that the idea of building up port city and urbanization and gentrification is not the way forward, and you're focusing on agriculture? Do you think it's because they're not self-sufficient that they're in trouble, or what do you feel is the way forward for them?
So I think that what Dushni Virukun said, Dr. Dushni Virukun said that there has to be a continuity of policies. That when the government changes, and this is a lesson I think for all governments in the region, that if there's a policy being put into place that's working, which this policy is working, it is bringing Sri Lanka back, back into the economic revival is happening. It may be slow, but it is happening. So it shouldn't be that a new government who comes in trashes that, drops it, and starts something new. Because I think that will, as she said, plunge it back into chaos. The other thing is very important is to recognize the importance of agriculture, which this government has recognized. And I think it wasn't maybe that clear when he said that when the Prime Minister said that we made those changes and they allow the peasantry delivered bumper harvest, because they reversed the policy that had, like they had cold turkey stopped the chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So there has to be some kind of balance. It shouldn't be one thing at the expense of the other. Things shouldn't be either or. They can be and.
I'm going to interrupt you, your question, Cyrus, there. I actually interject there, because you mentioned that you thought that it has to be one or the other. What I think she was trying, correct me if I'm wrong, what she was trying to say was that, and what most Sri Lankans see the issue is now, for example, there's the highways that came up. We all know that they were needed, but at what cost? I'm going to come back to this highways, because as an example I'll give you. We need the highways, definitely. But we know there was so much of corruption there. Then we have this, what is it called? Nilum What is it called? Nilum Kuluna. Lotus Tower.
Yes. These vanity projects which have no return on investment.
And money borrowed on commercial rates of interest. This is what speeded up our bankruptcy. The system, as someone said,
He said it was a hedge fund.
No, he also said this is something in the making. But I think this just speeded it up. Before that, I'm just going to say one more thing. I'll just use one example. Now, we have a minister who was a minister of finance, I think, or economic something. Anyway, now he's the cabinet spokesman, Bandula Gunawadana. He was a minister in the previous Mahinda Rajapaksa government. They stood by while they passed these, while they went ahead with these unsolicited projects for this highway. And now the reason I'm talking about it is the income we're getting from, I think it's one particular highway, or maybe all of them together, is 5 billion rupees per annum. Now, so they decided to go ahead with it. And the income the country gets from that is 5 billion. The cost of construction, the cost of that highway was 800 billion rupees. Now, the minister, Bandula Gunawadana, who was famous for many things, but at that time, who was part of the government which supported that, now part of this government is justifying the privatization of it, saying, this costed 800 billion rupees, we are only earning 5 billion rupees, it will take 160 years. Not even in my lifetime we do have this repayment. So we have to privatize. So these guys, they sit on they are actively promoting these things. And now when this, and Sri Lanka's highway cost is one of the highest in the world. In the world, correct?
Yes. Building the highways, you mean?
Yeah, sorry?
Building the highways.
Yes. The cost of construction. That's what I'm referring. So, I think definitely, I don't think none of us are of the opinion that we should not have these projects. But who decides them? Who decided that this project, this Lotus Tower was needed? Who decided that borrowing commercially was, So things like that, I think, is what.
And I think also money has to be spent better spent. We have an airport in Mattala, another vanity project with literally nothing. Nobody utilizes it, and they're talking of building yet another international airport.
Exactly, because when they have this construction,
they make
build
money
capital.
Yeah, of course.
They can make money. That is how they make money, not on services, not on education. Yeah. Build capital is the thing that the governments are promoting, because the ministers can, people in the sector can make money, commissions and all that.
Sorry, I think you had something to say.
Yeah, bringing back the conversation to your documentary, the title captured my heart, Democracy in Debt. Normally as Sri Lankans we talk about democracy separately and economic crisis and economic stabilization separately. And we most of the time we don't know how to draw parallels, and in your documentary I saw that you bring the farmer and the parliamentarian in one screen, and it captured my heart. And I wanted to know how did you construct that narrative, and what influenced you to do your documentary in this narrative line. And yeah, as a Sri Lankan, I think this is something that we should talk about, that don't isolate the democracy with the economic stabilization. And even in their conversation I hear that these vanity projects are not what people need.
Yeah.
So the democracy is not in the economic balance and how they manage it. So this is a hot topic that we should pick up from your documentary, and I want to know your opinion.
Thank you. Nalini, right? Pavitri, I'm sorry. We just met yesterday. Yeah, we met yesterday at an art exhibition actually on Black July. There's 2 or 3 exhibitions here, so that was, thank you for coming. So this, like I said, it's a lot of it is about access. And this concept, like it's acknowledged in the acknowledgements, the credits, so Dr. Sinaraja Tamita Delgoda, who's a historian and an art historian and a strategist who suggested this concept. So he worked with me on this, and without him, like I said in the credits, I could not have done this. He's a very old friend. I've known him since more than 30 years. So we worked together. So this was a very collaborative project. I came here on my own. I worked with local people. I worked with a local institution, Factum, which is a think tank in Colombo. And we worked together. There was a lot of back and forth. So it was, you know, I was trying to learn. I didn't come here with an agenda that I have to produce this result or this answer. I'm not here to give answers. I was asking questions. And that's what I tell my journalism students also, that sometimes it's more important to ask the questions than to give the answers, and sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know the answer. And that's another thing that, you know, like in teaching journalism, I often have journalists come in and talk to my students, and then I ask them what are the biggest mistakes they've made, and some of the things that stand out with me is things like not talking to the little people is one of the biggest mistakes journalists make, or pretending to know all the answers, you know, and not having the courage to say, I don't really know, I'm going to look into it, you know, it's worth looking into, thank you for asking the question, you know. So, and also in terms of like how putting the themes together. So that's something that I really feel very strongly about, and that's the slogan of Sapan News, which is our syndicated feature service. The slogan is, it's all connected. I think we have to go beyond these silos: democracy, economy, women's rights, human rights, art and culture, sports, everything. It's all connected, and so we need to see the different strands of each in the other, and to not do that either or thing again, like I said, you know, like look at the ands as well.
Very executive.
And thank you. And I just want to just end with by saying that is also the philosophy of the South Asia Peace Action Network, which is what you know, what we started talking about. So you know, I encourage everyone to go to southasiapeace.com. Sapan. Southasiapeace.com. Southasiapeace.com, and there's a founding charter, and many of the people here have endorsed that founding. We have more than 90 organizations that have endorsed that founding charter, which basically calls for regional cooperation and ease of visas and economic cooperation and collaborating on all issues. And hundreds of individuals have endorsed that charter. And I don't know what we're doing with that. I mean, but it's just like building. It's like slowly building that network, connecting those people who have, like I said in the beginning about the broader minimum common agenda for peace in the region. And for peace, you need, you know, all these things, all these interconnected things to be acknowledged and brought together, and people to be brought together who are working in different areas. So that's what we try to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, in the interest of time, we don't have much time more. we're going to go into just like we normally do, to some topics, some hot topics of this week and the week before. One of them is the issue of the IGP. And I mean, there's no issue. An issue is being created, basically. That's what's happening. The Supreme Court has given a clear ruling, and it is not being accepted. It is being vilified.
I mean, the background to it was a fundamental rights case was filed against the IJP for torture.
Yeah.
He was found guilty and he has to pay compensation. And despite that fact, he was appointed as to the top post in the police. I mean, you're having somebody convicted of in a fundamental rights case of torture being promoted to the Inspector General of Police. Highest position.
Yeah. And his appointment itself is
suspect because it was not done.
Eight or nine people petitioned, right? The Supreme Court.
No, his appointment is also illegal. His appointment itself is illegal.
Itself is illegal because the Constitutional Council didn't have the correct number of.
So even the Supreme Court has now given a ruling saying that he's not
to suspend him until such time as the cases are heard.
And now we see in Parliament the Prime Minister in Parliament using parliamentary privilege, hiding behind parliamentary privilege, saying that they cannot accept this. And we see the President saying, the Speaker and the Chief Justice need to meet and iron out these issues out. Others become a landmine. I think I saw somebody on Twitter say this landmine. I'm using his own Dr. Asanga Velikale. He's saying, you're the one who created this landmine. So you better sort it out. You have some humility. And I'm quoting.
You have to accept it. You can't.
Yes, you can. And the election commissioner wrote to the president and said it is his duty to appoint a person. And he has all the right. He says because he's contesting, he can't appoint a person. He said nothing like that. You have to continue to do your duty. So he has to. He's still the president.
So, president of a country who's also a lawyer. I think who's also celebrating, also commemorating 50 years, 45 or almost 50 years as a lawyer. Since he was enrolled into the bar, this is how he is behaving. And he should not forget that there are some of us here. I think you should say that, no, Lisa? Since you are the people.
There was a constitutional crisis a few years ago where the president at the time, Mr. Wickremesinghe, was Prime Minister and Maithripala was President. And they fell out. And Maithripala then appointed Mahinda Rajapaksa, sacking Ranil, appointed Maithripala, who didn't have the majority in Parliament. And I stood on the street for democracy.
So did I.
And Supreme Court ruled that it was an illegal sacking and reinstated Mr. Wickremesinghe. And now he's ignoring the Supreme Court. When it worked in his favour, he accepted it.
That is the biggest problem. These people change, and this hierarchy, this top so-called government, or the way they lie. Today there's something, another day it's another story. For me, it's sickening. Really sickening. The lies that is going on about the Constitution itself.
That's why they say politicians and diapers need to be changed.
Yes. Yes, I saw that.
All right, I think, can we move to the slide, CK, since you've come towards the end of the Lisha's quotes? She normally picks some quotes to read at the end of our roundtable discussion, which are relevant.
And this is actually relating to this shenanigans happening in the country. The first one is the Supreme Court has always been the last bastion of the protection of our freedoms, by Barbara Jordan. And the second one is presidents come and go, but the Supreme Court goes on forever. William Howard Taft. So, Supreme Court is supreme. Nobody is above the law. Absolutely. We need good governance and we need an election, I think. Let the people decide.
Yeah.
Please vote. Vote. Look at the person. Look at the individual. Not at. We are non-partisan. We don't promote any political party. But all we say is, please vote. It is your constitutional duty. It's your civic duty to vote. and look at the individual. Are they decent? Are they thugs? Have they been involved in corruption? Are there cases against him? Vote for a decent human being. That's all I can say. We need good governance.
All right, on that note, thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making time for us.
So much.
Yes.
On
I
day,
know you are on a tight schedule, and I believe
leaving
you're
tomorrow.
All
yeah.
right, safe journey on
Flying
day
to Karachi
299.
tomorrow.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And
So-
I'm actually sorry, and I'm showing the film there, and also I just learned that the GeoTV is translating it and will be showing this film there
nice,
as well.
Fantastic.
The biggest TV channel in Pakistan.
Wow, amazing. So just to remind our viewers that this Sunday will be day 300. It's 300 days since we started this at our usual street corner at Tibrigasaya, opposite Health Guard Pharmacy. If you're passing by in the area, please join us between 5 and 6 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Beena. Thank you, all of you. Thanks, guys. Good night.